So the title of this webinar, thanks for the introduction. The title of this webinar is Strategies for Remote Teaching for CCI Labs and Engaged Coursework. Let's see. So the structure of the webinar is I'll try to keep my remarks within about 10-12 minutes, I'm hoping. You all know how much professors like to talk, so we'll try to keep it close to maximum 15 minutes, and then we'll just open it up for a lot of questions. So I did do a little survey of our own faculty in early courses, specifically the first two courses, and got some feedback, and so I structured the webinar around that with help from CTL. So the three areas we're going to focus on is online communications, assessments and lab strategies, and effective use of teaching assistants in labs. So because lab courses have special needs, and so they have some issues that are coming on because you suddenly switch to an online offering of all courses across the university. Okay, so in online communication, and this assumes that you're using Canvas as your learning management system, which if it's an early course, they're probably large courses, you have to use an LMS to be efficient. There are two ways you can communicate. One is the announcement feature in Canvas. The second is the discussion forum in Canvas. And I'll give a couple of examples in a second. So announcements are ways to communicate to your learners if a new topic is being started upon by an instructor, or you give them instructions on how to complete a specific module at the beginning of that module, and so on. And there are a number of features and announcements that you can take advantage of. You can make sure that only you as instructor would be sending these announcements. You can use them to automatically send announcements and as reminders. So for instance, in my course, I try to give automatic reminders when a deadline comes up for a particular assignment or a particular quiz or something is due that day. So it sends out the announcement at 12:01 in the morning, and so the students know exactly that this is required, and so they start working on it. And that's very important because a lot of students wait till the last minute to do anything these days. So that's one good thing. The discussion forums are a way to encourage learners to ask questions, and you can create discussions by topic. There are lots of options in discussions you can take advantage of to keep student engagement. And you can limit it to a particular range of dates, and that's what I do. For each module, I have its own discussion forum, and I turn off the option for the students to create their own discussion unless it is really, really necessary, which is possible. But in my case, every module has got its own discussion focused on a particular topic, and you can also limit it to specific groups. That I've not used, but you can certainly do that. The other things you can do is when you're posting. When students are posting questions, you can provide specific guidelines at the top of the discussion. Say that here is how you should be posting. Don't say that give me the answer or something like that. You can provide proper guidelines on how to post good questions, and you can actually grade them as well. And many instructors use them to grade posts, or you can be ungraded, or you can ask them, say that you need to post at least once, and then you at least respond at least twice. These are all possible ways to encourage interaction among the students and making them ask questions. And so on. So the next slide shows a couple of examples. So this is sort of the latest announcement that I sent for my module 6. This is sort of the most difficult project in this class. So here and ideally what you want with an announcement is to give them some context on where they were before and where they're going with this module, how are they connected to it. But in this case, I'm actually telling them that this is going to be a really difficult assignment, and so it's coming up. It's got more time, but they don't have any time to waste. They need to start early, all of that. And then I also give them hints on how to go about doing that, and point to, and ideally you can also point to materials within the module that can find the help. So I haven't done that here, so this is not necessarily the most perfect announcement, but I do give them enough information and warnings on what's coming up and what they need to be doing, where they should be doing, asking questions, and so on, and how that relates to previous assignment and so on. So you can do all that, and then let's see, the next slide and then this gives you an example of delayed announcements where at the beginning of the semester, I set up a whole bunch of announcements that will go to the students during each deadline. So I figured it out. This is a fully online course. So I figured out all the deadlines ahead of time, and then you can actually send that, set that up so that you don't have to worry about sending an announcement on the day of the deadline. So that's one thing I use that for. And the other picture shows you some options in discussion forums. Is it going to be graded? I don't use all of these. I do use some of them. I do have the dates I use to limit the discussion to those dates for that particular topic. You don't. Otherwise, what you're going to get is like messages coming in on unrelated topics and so on. So that's advantageous for that. Okay, let me sort of quickly go through. Okay, let me talk about assessments a little bit. And this has been from the feedback I got from faculty. Assessments and lab assessments are really complicated because in-lab assessments, they typically do in-lab assessments. And so how do you do that online? You know, it's going to be difficult. You can't see them. There are issues with the students not having webcams, or you can't monitor them using webcams. And monitoring them online is also not that not that simple. So I have some ideas on this. You can use the Canvas quizzes, short quizzes, very quickly to get them, at least get something, ask them questions on what that assignment is about, and then what some of the conceptual parts of this assignment. You can ask questions on that. You can have like multiple choice, multiple answers, short answer, essay, and you can make them really short so that they're not necessarily collaborating with somebody else at the same time. If you give them a whole day to do the same assessment, then there's a chance for them to collaborate with other people and do it together. So this would at least limit the amount of cheating that might happen if that's what you're worried about. There are other things you can use, things like you can show only one question at a time in a quiz. You can also shuffle the questions so they don't necessarily see them in the same order. And you can also customize these quizzes. That takes a little bit more work, but those are some ways to minimize cheating. The in-class lab exams, this is challenging because you cannot really oversee the students. You cannot limit the time to like 10 minutes. It's really difficult if it's a complicated program or assignment they're trying to do, assessment or exam question they're trying to answer. You need to give them more time. So some ideas there is you can customize the problem and give different problems to different students of similar difficulty. That definitely has a downside in the sense that it probably is more complicated to grade if you have like multiple versions of the same question. The thing that I would suggest is the second point, which is to make the students come up with the logic for the pseudocode if it's a programming type exam. But in general, you can ask them about how do you go about solving this problem. This could be just in paragraph mode. They can write something. They can write pseudocode. They can write scaffolded code. Something like I'll talk about that in a minute. That's what I've been using in my class. And then you can also use question banks and groups to have sets of problems. So you can create groups within the question banks, and then you can choose some number of questions out of that group. So thereby, not everybody gets the same set of questions. That's another way to limit cheating. So I would suggest, given that many of you are being kind of dumped into this online forum without any warning, one thing I would suggest is to not necessarily have the lab exam count for the 100% of the grade. Give them a little quiz at the beginning of the exam. It could be a 10 minutes, 5 minutes, it could be multiple choice, something. They talk something about the exam questions, so directly ask them, things like that. And then the second part would be and you can do all of this in a single lab exam period. You can ask them to design or write pseudocode of that question or their problem that they're trying to solve, and that can be done in Canvas. So you could create a quiz, another quiz for that part one. They write down the design of the solution as part of that. And then the third part is what they're doing is the exam. It's certainly implementation of the exam on their own computer. And then if you distribute the grade for these three parts separately, then you should have less weight on the third part, and then it'll also get distributed. So thereby, you're forcing them to think through the problem, come up with a solution, and then if you want to if you're going to go even further, then you can actually give slightly different problems to different groups of students. So those are all ways to try to minimize cheating, but also to make sure they can actually think through the problem and come up with a solution. So those are some ideas that I could think of, and I used this model in my 3112 course, but I've had a lot more time to think about this and then do this in a more formal way. But this is something you can quickly do that using just Canvas quizzes. And then the third part, there's no change. You're still going to do whatever you normally do in your class. Okay, the last thing that I'll talk about is effective use of teaching assistants. All of you have, if you're teaching large classes, then you're going to have lots and lots of students, and you're going to have a group of TAs helping you. And so how do we use them efficiently? I would suggest use the TAs as a way to communicate with your students regularly. In other words, let them answer questions. They need to answer questions promptly. Students in online forum need prompt feedback. They expect to have some kind of stimulation constantly so that they can feel engaged and be part of the course. So they do need to answer questions promptly. The only thing I would say there is that if it's part of a discussion forum, give a couple of hours for other students to also participate and answer questions. That might be a useful thing to have. But if nothing is forthcoming, then a couple of hours, the TA should really respond right away. So they need to be monitoring, and you can set it up so that the questions can go to their email directly. They don't have to be logged into Canvas all the time. If they're working in, the second idea is if you're working in groups, and many of you are doing breakout groups, that's what I remember, the TAs can proactively enter into the group and make sure to ask them some questions. How are they doing? How are they progressing? Remember, not all groups are going to be proactive in asking questions. So they can go into the group and then ask them specifically how are they progressing. You can give them like a little prompted list of things that they can ask, as instructors. So you can guide them in these things very carefully so that they are working through and making sure they are asking them in a polite fashion, diplomatic fashion, and so on. And that's very important, to treat students with respect and dignity and ask them diplomatically how they're doing and so on. The third point I would say is make sure the grading is done promptly. This is very important in an online, especially in an online course, because that's the feedback they're getting right away. So in a class, at least they're talking to other people and so on, but in an online course, they're not doing that a whole lot. So you want to get the grading done, and students really care about grades a lot. I mean, it's like, you would be amazed some of the experience I've had where I gave them 1 point to do a survey, and like my participation went from like 50% to like 100% overnight. So they care about their grades, even though they don't understand how much really each of them counts towards the final grade. The last thing, a few more points, you can help them, the TAs can help you create example expected output. You might already be doing this, but having what a solution might look like would be helpful to students to know that this is the goal they are targeting towards. Okay, and if you are not sure about how your lectures and assignments is going, you can use your TAs as a way to practice what you're telling them. On terms of assignments, they can ask them to solve the problem themselves. Make sure that students are, and then look at this, make sure it's a reasonable problem that you're giving. Make sure you're not giving them too much to do in this online setting. And then the last thing is very important that came up in yesterday's town hall meeting with the dean. That's what I heard. I wasn't able to attend that, but what I heard was that there's been a lot of disruption among students, that students who might normally be available in class may not necessarily be available now. So you might see drop-offs in attendance and so on. So make sure you are sensitive, accommodating. You might even ask them if there are any issues, if they're not attending, how you can help, and maybe try to be more accommodating. Those are things that I think that's important. This has not happened in my class so far, because mine was already an online course to start with, and so they knew what was coming. But for many instructors who've suddenly been switched to online, a lot of them have gone back home, and so they may not have the same time availability, and they might be working because they've lost their job. Those are things to think about. Let's see, that's all I want to say. What did I do? I probably did like 15 minutes. Okay. That's all I want to say at this point. So we can have a discussion now, ask questions at this point. Either you can just talk. Yeah, go ahead.
We have a question from the chat by Tiong asking, okay, do we need to give timely feedback about the lab exam part 1, the pseudocode, before lab exam part 2?
Hang on a second. Oh, okay. I'm seeing the chat. I'm just trying to make sure. Okay. My answer to that is, if you can give feedback. So that's what I do in my class. We have a design step that is like what is called a milestone, the first milestone. And then what I do is they do a design, they do like a flow chart or something, some kind of a diagram they draw about their program, and then I make sure the TAs are giving back, grade that part within a day or two at most. So that's what I've been trying to do. So if you can give any kind of feedback right away, if you have enough TA support and they have enough time, definitely giving some feedback on that would be very helpful. But I understand also that this is all kind of sudden and disruptive, so it's difficult to do that in a formal way. So any kind of, one thing you could do is use the discussion forum as a way to provide feedback. So like let them, and then you can give them feedback either individually as a group or, but yes, if you can give any kind of feedback before they go to the implementation. But again, okay, let me go back. That's not quite true what I said, because this is, if you're doing this during an exam, that's a very different matter. So what I proposed in this model was the exam would have a 10-minute quiz, and then a design step that they would use that on Canvas, on a Canvas quiz, and then they would do the implementation. So if you're going to do the exam that way, then there is no feedback time at that point. That's to me, that's very difficult. What I'm thinking about the model in my course is this is like scheduled over a period of a week or 8 days. So then you can do that, but I doubt that you can do that in an exam situation if you have exactly 1 hour or 2 hours to do the exam. Does that answer your question? I don't know if it's helpful, but yeah, for in-class activities you can certainly do that, but for exams, that it depends on the amount of time you have. That might be tough because it takes time to go through. If you have a large class, it's going to take a lot of time to go through and give feedback to each student after they've done part 1. So that's what I would say at this point. Any other questions? Oh, I see. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I see another question. Some students are eligible to receive an emergency relief fund to help with the transition. That is correct. That is correct. I do remember seeing a note from the chancellor yesterday that there is a university emergency fund, and actually they're asking for donations to that fund as well. They have some kind of a matching contribution, so they do have, students need to know that they can apply for this thing. I think, so the one thing I would say is you could send a note to your students pointing to this link that actually Nicholas has put up here. And then, or if you go to uncc.edu and just search for emergency relief fund, you'll find it. I think that's a good idea to point that to the students if they don't already know. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think the emergency fund is a good idea to send it to all your students, especially a lot of people who have been kind of asked to vacate the dorms, and so and some of them might have been working here part-time or something, and so they would have been forced to be laid off, so they might be needing of some financial support at this point. So I think that's a good. Let's see. All right. Any other questions? So either you can use the microphone or you can type it into the chat box. Either way is fine. Oh, okay. Let's see. Kiran, do you want to say anything about any of this stuff that I might have missed? I saw I kind of talked really fast.
No, I think you covered most of the points. I think there are no questions, and give some information. Maybe if anybody would want to reach out to you, they know how to contact you to, get hold of your.
So let's see. So okay, so I'll just put that. So let me go back to the. so my email is here, and I will also, let's see. So feel free to contact me. I'm putting my email ID as well on the chat box. If you have any questions or anything else you want to contact me, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I certainly can make these slides available if you guys want to, but I think we are doing a recording of the webinar, so it should be accessible through that as well. Yeah, that's right. Just as Enoch just said, we can certainly send the recorded archive. In fact, some of our faculty in CCI also was asking about that. Yeah, because many of them are in class right now. So, okay. Let's see. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's see if I missed anything here. As I said, it's the first time I'm doing this. I probably went a little fast. So several of you here are doing lab courses. Do you always want to say something about your challenges you've faced so far? Use the microphone so that we can directly, so everybody else can hear you. So I know that Nadia and Chong also teaches lab style courses. So feel free to talk about challenges you might face in your courses that I may not have answered.
Yes, this is Chong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I really do feel, some difficulty, in organized labs, especially in this remote learning. Usually before, face-to-face, we, work in the lab in class, usually we look around and take a look at students, the results. And now, in that way, we get very quick feedback. And now in this, remote way, and kind of, translate the lab, into the lecture now. So I love what you propose this one. So maybe I will cut into the original, this kind of peer lab to, quiz and some, shooter code, kind of based quiz, right? And then actually implement. I think this is really good model. I want to, take a look at least I want to try.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's not instantaneous. The feedback is not real time. And so, yeah, you're kind of using proxies for getting feedback, which is not necessarily synchronous, essentially. So, are you doing synchronous teaching, or are you doing, what is your model now? Are you doing actual teaching during your normal class time?
Yes, I use this synchronization way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you get questions from the students during the class?
I get some question, but compared before, I think it's more lecturing, compared to before.
Yeah.
But I think you are right. I need to put, even for this kind of lab, for me, kind of lecture now, I need to cut to more quiz based.
One thing you can try is, which other people have also tried, is to, when you're lecturing, every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you can put up a question on your slide and ask them to answer or something. You know, either I don't know how much work it is to do the poll everywhere, but basically you can just type up a quiz and then ask them to answer yes or no or a multiple choice or something. So that could be a way to make them participate at least. So those are ways to kind of prompt them a little bit to answer questions and participate more actively. Otherwise, you don't even know if they're there. They might be logged in, but they might be in some other part of their house doing something else. So, in fact, Taghi Mustafavi, he couldn't join us. He had asked me because he teaches the architecture course with a lab, and he wants to know whether the students are present or not. Are they attending or not? Because if they don't attend, then they lose points for not attending. So he's asking me, how do I know that they're attending? You know, I want to know. They might be attending at the beginning of the class, and then they might have taken off, and then I don't know whether they're attending or not. So how do I tell whether they can attend? So my answer to that was like, okay, you can set up I don't know, a survey question or something, or a quiz where they would have to say, oh, I'm present at the beginning of the class, and then every 30 minutes they have to go and answer again whether they're present or not. So I mean, the TA can actually do some of that part, whereby they can set it up so that they'll open up a quiz 30 minutes into the class and say they have to go and say I'm present. Or after an hour, they can do the same thing. So it depends on how concerned you are. So those are some ways to use Canvas. This is assuming you have a TA who can do some of that legwork during the class. It's very important because otherwise your lecture will get kind of interrupted, and that's also not very good. But some instructors are worried about students attending and being in class, which you're not able to monitor with WebEx in an easy way. So those are a couple of ways you can try to make sure the students are participating and are engaged in the class that I can think of. Anything else?
Okay.
Kiran, you have any other suggestions on that, the attendance part?
No, it's not a suggestion, just some comment. I think I like what you propose here. And
okay.
Especially, my class is programming based.
Right.
Data structure computing is programming based. We check how they think. We teach them, how to think and how to solve problem. And in this remote way, even for this kind of programming, still we can cut into, especially from design perspective, still we can cut into some little assessment. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, my original thinking for that design part was primarily to break up the entire exam into multiple pieces, so that at least you're not cheating on all of that exam, from somebody else or somebody else writing it for them. So at least they are forced to go through these multiple steps, and then hopefully that they'll pay attention to the problem solution and the model. So I've only used that for the programming project that are like a week long or something like that, or a week long or 10 days long. For that it works fine. But you can do a version of that, a simplified version of that here in the exam. That should help them. And then you can have, like, if you have a class of 50 students, you can have 4 or 5 different problems and give all 5 of those problems, and each student will get at random one of those 5 problems, and then that could be a way to also split up the exam into different problems, so not everybody is doing the exact same problem for the entire thing. So those are ways to make sure the academic integrity is maintained to a large extent. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. I can share my experience with my lab. So I've been using, I use synchronous, of course, but of course I'm also lenient in the people that if you can't join, the lab instructions are there, you'll complete it on your own and submit, and then on Canvas. But a lot of students were actually still showing up and working synchronously during the lab sessions. So I used the WebEx training, and I created breakout sessions. So I find when in these classes, especially the synchronous one, breaking them into smaller groups just makes it more manageable. You give them a task to complete, and you can pop in and kind of actually see what they're doing, comment, and kind of discuss on a smaller group as well. So I put them in groups for the lab. They partner up, they work together, they collaborate, they can be able to share screen, ask questions. Of course, each individually will have to do the work on their own machines because they still have to submit individually, but they have somebody to ask questions and kind of talk to and debug. And when our labs are broken up into like several parts, and after they complete each part, they actually raise their hand, and me or the TAs would pop in to their breakout and actually see their code. We tell them to share, view us what they did, we comment, and so on.
Okay.
I find that was manageable and doable. We tried it last week, and surprisingly, it worked.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's exactly. I think if you have TAs also who can help with that, then you can manage the large size of the classes that way, so that everybody gets a chance to get asked questions and then get them answered in a reasonable amount of time. I agree.
Yeah.
So, how many students do you have in your class?
About 67, I think.
And so you have like what, 2 or 3 TAs to help, or
I have 2 or 3 TAs, but my labs are actually broken up into 3. So each lab has about 24 students, anywhere 18 to 24, because we were down into a physical lab before, so they have.
Right. And you have like the groups are like what, 2 to 3 students or something, or
students for the lab, trying to pair them up. We do.
Okay.
And in my class, I do they're actually also, I put them in groups about 4 to 5.
Okay. And do the TAs normally pop in voluntarily, or only when they ask a question they actually go in?
No, we do actually pop in every now and then. You know, aside from that, and if we're not attending to other, we would go in the session, say, hey, everything okay? What do you guys?
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
See, and then pop out, see if they're talking, and almost over. You know, they were always collaborating. You know.
Yeah, I think proactively checking on them. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
Make sure things are progressing. Yeah.
And then you can tell them, like, if I see something like consistent problem or issue that, you know, all the groups are facing, I'll tell them, okay, you know, I'm going to end the breakout session so we can have a discussion about it, or share or address them all at once, and then start the breakout session.
I see.
So it's,
I see.
It works.
That looks good. Yeah, it sounds you're on the right track there, definitely. Okay. Let's see. Any other comments? Okay. I don't see anything in. Oh, there are also links to WebEx breakout session I see here. So that also could be useful to others. You might be thinking about breakout sessions. Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
I think that there are some persons that have left, so
yeah.
We are clear with comments on the chat.
Okay. Okay, I don't see anything.
I think we could possibly end the session. If anybody would have any questions, they could just email you or reach out to you personally.
Right, sure. Yeah, okay. Great. I'm glad you guys